The galaxy was a place of endless conflict, but for Kale, a seasoned human warrior, it had become a familiar stage for battle. He had seen countless planets, fought in numerous wars, and crossed paths with all kinds of species. But nothing had prepared him for the mission that lay ahead. Kyle was hired to protect Queen Zara, the leader of the peaceful and wise Zoralians. Her people had been threatened by enemies who sought to overthrow her rule and destroy her peaceful nation. The human mercenaries had been hired for their strength, but Kyle, with his experience, was chosen for one reason: his heart. Kyle had always been known for his courage. Unlike other warriors who fought for money or glory, he fought for something greater: justice. He had no love for war, but when it came to protecting the innocent, he was willing to lay down his life. He met Zara on a cold, distant planet just before the peace summit. Zara, a regal and graceful queen, had never seen a human warrior quite like Kale. He was tall and strong, with scars across his arms and face that told stories of battles fought and won. But what stood out most was his calm demeanor. He wasn't like the others. He didn't seek honor or fame. Instead, he seemed to carry a weight of responsibility that only those who had seen true suffering could understand. Zara had heard of Kale's reputation, but now, standing before him, she could see the depth of his commitment. She was no stranger to war, but her people had always sought peace. She was reluctant to ask for help, but when her advisors insisted, she knew she had no other choice. As the days passed, Zara and Kale spoke little. He stayed focused on the task at hand, scanning for threats, ensuring her safety. Zara, on the other hand, spent her time preparing for the summit. She was intelligent and sharp, but the weight of leadership often bore down on her. She couldn't help but feel a quiet admiration for the man who stood by her side, always vigilant. The journey to the peace summit was long and treacherous. They traveled through unknown space, passing through asteroid fields and unstable wormholes. There was always the risk of an ambush, but Kale remained calm. His instincts were sharper than anyone else's. He knew how to stay ahead of the enemy. Everything seemed quiet, but Zara had a feeling that danger was close. She couldn't shake the sense that someone was watching them. A few days into their journey, her intuition proved true. Without warning, a fleet of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, coming from the shadows of a nearby moon. Their weapons charged, their intent clear. They had come to kill Zara. The Zoralian forces were few, and the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. Zara's heart raced as the enemy fleet began to open fire. The ship's shields buckled under the assault, and sparks flew across the control room. Kale immediately took charge, barking orders to the crew, ensuring they prepared for the worst. "Get us to that moon!" Kale shouted, his voice steady. "We can lose them in the craters!" As the ship plunged toward the moon, the enemy fleet followed closely, firing their weapons with precision. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the chaos unfold. She had never been in a battle like this. She had led her people with wisdom, but she had never fought a war. In that moment, she felt powerless. But Kale was different. He was already working on a plan. He knew that their only chance was to escape, and fast. The enemy ships were gaining on them, and soon they would be within firing range. Kale needed time. With quick thinking, he made the decision to land on the moon. The rocky surface would offer them cover, and they could hide among its canyons. The ship shuddered as it descended, rocks and debris flying in every direction as the ship touched down. Zara was shaken, but forced herself to remain composed. She needed to focus. She had to trust Kale, and she did. Once the ship was on the ground, Kale immediately moved to the door, preparing to make a run for the nearby cave system. Zara watched him, her heart racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed, watched by eyes that wanted to end her reign. "Stay close," Kyle said, his voice low. We can make it if we keep moving. Zara nodded, her body tense. She was ready to run, but she wasn't sure what to expect. Would they make it out alive? The thought terrified her. As they ventured deeper into the moon's rocky caverns, Zara noticed something she hadn't before. Kyle was unshaken, despite the danger. He moved with purpose, as if he had done this countless times. But his eyes were different, focused. Every step he took was calculated, every movement deliberate. He was protecting her, not out of obligation, but because he truly cared. It wasn't long before they heard the sound of footsteps behind them, too many to be ignored. The enemy was coming. Zara's heart dropped as the air around them grew tense. She could hear the voices of soldiers, alien forces who had come to finish what they started. They were close. Just as Kyle was about to instruct her to hide behind a large rock formation, a loud sound echoed through the cave, a sharp, whistling noise followed by a quick whoosh. Kyle's instincts kicked in. He turned quickly, just in time to throw himself in front of Zara. The arrows came flying toward them, sharp and deadly. One arrow aimed directly at Zara's chest, another at her head. But Kyle wasn't going to let that happen. With no hesitation, he threw himself in front of the queen, taking the arrows in his own body. Zara screamed, rushing to his side as he fell to the ground, blood pouring from the wounds. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Kale, the strong warrior she had admired, was hurt, badly. He lay there, his body covered in blood, but his expression remained calm. "You're safe," he whispered. Zara knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. Her mind raced. She couldn't lose him now, not after everything they had been through. The enemy soldiers were closing in. They were almost there. But Kale wasn't giving up. He grabbed Zara's arm weakly and pulled her toward the hidden cave entrance. "We fight together," Kyle said, his voice hoarse. "Keep moving." Zara could hardly believe what she was hearing. Kyle, despite being gravely injured, was still, determined to protect her. In that moment, she realized just how much this warrior had sacrificed. He wasn't just protecting her because it was his job. He was doing it because he cared. The cave was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft drip of water from the stalactites above, and the heavy breathing of Kale as he lay on the cold ground, bleeding from the arrow wounds. Zara's heart hammered in her chest as she knelt beside him, panic creeping into her thoughts. She had never seen a warrior like him, strong, fearless, but now so vulnerable. Kale's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. The blood from the arrows was staining his shirt, his strong chest heaving with each breath. Zara gently pressed her hands against the wounds, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. But there was too much. Kale's warrior spirit was undeniable, but it was fading with each passing second. "Hold on, Kale," Zara whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, you can't leave me." She didn't know what drove her to care so much. He was just a mercenary, just a warrior she hired for a job. Yet, she couldn't deny the bond that had formed between them, even if it had been brief. His protection, his sacrifice. It all felt more personal than she could admit. Kale groaned softly, his eyes flickering open. His hand weakly reached for hers, gripping it with surprising strength despite the blood loss. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. Zara's heart clenched as she looked into his eyes. She had seen many leaders, many warriors, but none with the same unwavering resolve as Kale. He was a protector in the truest sense of the word. No matter what, he would never give up. But Zara knew they were running out of time. The enemy was still out there, and they were getting closer. She had to make a choice, stay here and risk their lives, or try to get Kale to safety. She knew they couldn't stay in the cave for long. Soon, the enemies would be on them, and with Kale in this condition, there was no telling how long he could survive. "I won't leave you," Zara said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to get you to safety. We need help." Kale shook his head weakly. "Not yet. There's something I need to tell you." Zara's brow furrowed. What could he possibly want to say now? They were in danger, and he was barely hanging on. "Listen to me," Kale continued, his voice becoming even more faint. I didn't take this job for the money, Zara. I took it because I believe in what you're doing. I believe in your people." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard him speak like this before. The warrior who had once seemed so distant and cold now revealed a part of himself she hadn't expected. "I didn't want to be part of another war," Kyle said, his grip on her hand tightening. "But when I saw the way your people were suffering, the way you lead with compassion and wisdom, it made me want to fight for you, to protect you." Zara's eyes filled with tears as she gazed at him. She had always been so focused on the summit, on the peace talks, that she hadn't realized how much the war had already affected her. Kyle, a mere mercenary, had become more than just a protector. He had become a symbol of everything she wanted her people to be. "Kyle, don't talk like that," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You'll be fine. We'll get you out of here." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. "It's too late for me, but you have to keep going. Your people need you." Before Zara could respond, a sudden noise echoed from the entrance of the cave. A group of soldiers appeared, their faces grim and determined. Zara's heart raced as she saw them approach. These were the enemies she had been running from, the ones who sought to end her reign. "Zara, we need to move," one of the soldiers said, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time." Zara nodded quickly, her mind racing. She couldn't leave Kyle behind, but she also knew that staying would mean certain death. She had to make a choice, and she had to make it quickly. "We're not leaving him," she said firmly. "He's with me, and we're not going anywhere without him." The soldiers hesitated. They had their orders, and those orders didn't include saving a wounded mercenary. But Zara's voice was commanding, and there was no way they could ignore the Queen's wishes. "Help me," Zara ordered. "We need to carry him." With the help of her soldiers, Zara and Kale were carefully lifted and carried through the cave system. Each step was a struggle, but Zara stayed close to Kale, her thoughts focused on getting him to safety. They moved through dark tunnels, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they went deeper into the mountain. The sound of enemy soldiers grew distant, but Zara knew they wouldn't stop looking for her. They couldn't afford to slow down. Eventually, they reached an old, abandoned Zoralian hideout, an underground bunker that had been used by her people during earlier wars. It was the only place she knew that could offer shelter, at least for a short while. The entrance was hidden by dense foliage, and the tunnel leading inside was concealed by fallen rocks. It was a place that had long been forgotten, a place that could offer them some respite. Inside, Zara quickly ordered her soldiers to begin setting up a medical station for Kyle. She couldn't afford to lose him, not after everything he had done for her, not after everything they had been through together. As Kale was carefully laid down on a makeshift bed, Zara stood by his side, her eyes never leaving him. She was scared of losing him, scared of what the future held. But she couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. "We'll fix you up," Zara said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Kale's eyes fluttered open, his face pale from blood loss. "Zara," he whispered, "I don't regret any of it. I would do it all over again." Zara smiled through her tears, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You will survive, Kyle. You've already proven what kind of warrior you are. You'll make it through this." Kale gave a weak smile, his eyes closing again as exhaustion overtook him. "Promise me, you'll keep fighting." Zara nodded, her voice unwavering. "I will. For you. For all of us." The days in the underground bunker were long and filled with tension. Kale's wounds were grave, but he was a survivor. Zara stayed by his side, nursing him back to health. Despite his condition, Kale's warrior spirit never seemed to fade. He was determined to fight through the pain, to continue protecting the queen he had sworn to defend. Zara spent every moment she could by his side, tending to his injuries, making sure he was comfortable. She was a leader, yes, but now she found herself learning the value of loyalty, not just to her people, but to those who had proven their devotion. Kale wasn't just a mercenary to her anymore. He was more than that. He had become her ally, her protector, and in a way, her friend. The days in the hideout passed in a blur. The enemy forces continued to search for them, but the bunker was well hidden, deep in the heart of the mountains. Zara's soldiers did their best to keep watch, but they all knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy found their hideout. Zara knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. The peace summit was drawing near, and the political situation was growing more dangerous by the day. Her people needed her leadership, and the longer she stayed holed up in the mountains, the less time she had to fix the mess she had inherited. She had made a promise to Kale. She would not abandon him, not after everything he had done. But she also knew that if she didn't act soon, everything she had worked for would be lost. One evening, as Zara sat by Kale's side, her mind racing with thoughts of what needed to be done, Kale's voice broke through her thoughts. "Zara," he whispered, his eyes barely open, his face still pale from blood loss. "You can't stay here forever. You need to go. You need to lead your people." Zara looked at him, her heart heavy. "I won't leave you, Kyle. You're not going to die." Kale managed a weak smile, his hand reaching out to grasp hers. "I'm not afraid to die, Zara. I've lived a life full of battles and sacrifices, but I want to see you succeed. I want to see you lead your people to peace." Zara's eyes filled with tears. She had never expected to find someone like Kale, someone who cared so deeply about her, someone who was willing to sacrifice everything for her cause. She had always been focused on her people, her mission. But Kale had shown her a different kind of strength, one built on loyalty, sacrifice, and selflessness. "I'll fight for you, Kale," Zara promised, her voice shaking. "I'll make sure you don't die. We'll get through this together." Kyle squeezed her hand, his strength slowly fading, but his resolve unwavering. "You have to. You're the only one who can." The next morning, Zara made a decision. She couldn't stay hidden any longer. She couldn't let Kyle's sacrifice be in vain. She needed to return to the summit, to confront the forces that sought to destroy her and her people. With the help of her soldiers, Zara and Kyle were carefully moved from the bunker. It wasn't easy. Kyle was weak, but he insisted on walking, as much as he could, refusing to be carried like a burden. Zara couldn't help but admire his determination. Even in the face of death, Kale never once gave up. As they made their way through the mountains, Zara's mind was focused on one thing: the peace summit. She had to reach it before her enemies did. She had to prove to her people that she could lead them, that she could protect them from the forces that sought to tear them apart. The journey was long and grueling. Zara's soldiers kept watch for any signs of the enemy, but it was Kyle who kept them on track. He was the one with the experience, the one who could read the terrain and know where danger lurked. He guided them through hidden paths and secret tunnels, using every bit of his knowledge to keep them safe. Finally, after days of travel, they reached the border of the peace summit. The atmosphere was tense, as if the very air knew that a decision was about to be made that would affect the fate of the galaxy. Zara could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. She was about to face her enemies, those who had sought to kill her, who had tried to tear apart everything she had worked for. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had Kyle by her side, and he had already proven what kind of warrior he was. Kyle's strength was slowly returning. He was still weak, still recovering from his injuries, but his resolve had only grown stronger. Zara knew that he wasn't just a warrior, he was a symbol of hope for her people. He had saved her life. And now he was helping her save her people's future. They made their way into the summit, the room filled with leaders from across the galaxy. Zara stood tall, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. She spoke of peace, of unity, of the future they could build together. But she also spoke of the sacrifices that had been made to get to this point, the sacrifices made by her people and the sacrifices made by Kale. Without Kale, none of us would be here, Zara said, her voice unwavering. He gave everything to protect me, to protect our future. His loyalty is something we should all strive to emulate. The room fell silent. The leaders who had once questioned her leadership now looked at her with new respect. Zara knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that with Kale by her side, anything was possible. Kale, though weak, stood beside her, his presence commanding. His scars, both physical and emotional, were proof of the battles he had fought, and the battles he had won. Zara couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude toward him. He had saved her life, and now, together, they would save her people. As the summit continued, Zara and Kale spoke with the leaders, negotiating terms, forging alliances, and building a future where peace could finally take root. But Zara knew that peace wouldn't come easily. It would take time, and it would take effort. But she was ready to do whatever it took. Kale's recovery continued, and over time, he regained his strength. The two of them worked together side by side, building a future for their people. The bond between them grew stronger, not just because of what they had been through, but because they had become something more than allies. They had become partners, fighting for a common cause. The day came when Zara formally invited Kale to stand beside her, not just as a protector, but as an equal. She offered him a position at her side to help guide their people into the future. Kale, though humbled, accepted. He had fought for peace, for Zara, and now he would fight beside her to make that peace a reality. The days following the peace summit were filled with both triumph and challenge. The leaders of the galaxy had agreed to a tentative peace, but there was still much work to be done. Zara stood at the helm of a new era, but the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer just the queen of the Zoralians, she was a leader of the galaxy, entrusted with the future of thousands of species. Kale stood by her side, not as a mere protector, but as her equal. He had earned his place in her world, not just through his sacrifice, but through his loyalty, wisdom, and strength. Every scar on his body told a story of battles fought, enemies defeated, and sacrifices made. Zara had seen him at his weakest, but now she saw him at his strongest. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. The first few weeks after the summit were a blur of negotiations, discussions, and decisions. Zara and Kale worked tirelessly, side by side, to ensure the peace treaty was upheld. They traveled to distant planets, meeting with alien leaders and forging alliances. Every day brought new challenges, but with each obstacle they overcame, they grew stronger. One evening, as they sat in the royal chambers of the Zoralian palace, Zara looked at Kyle, her heart full of gratitude. She had come a long way since that fateful day when Kyle had stepped in front of the arrows to save her life. Now, she stood on the brink of a new future, and Kyle was right there with her. "You've done more for me than I could ever repay," Zara said softly, her voice full of emotion. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here. My people wouldn't be here." Kale looked at her, his expression calm, but there was something in his eyes that spoke volumes. He didn't need praise, but he appreciated her words. They had been through so much together, and he had come to care for her in ways he hadn't expected. She was no longer just a queen. She was someone he would fight for, no matter the cost. "I didn't do it for thanks," Carl replied, his voice steady. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. And because I believe in you, Zara." Zara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Cale had become more than just a protector to her. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. Together, they had faced the darkest moments, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. They spent more time together, not just as queen and warrior, but as equals. They shared their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. Zara had always been a leader, but Cale had shown her what it truly meant to lead with honor, courage, and compassion. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the palace gardens, Zara turned to Cale, her expression serious. "Cale," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I want to offer you something. You've proven yourself time and time again, not just as a warrior, but as someone I can trust. I want you to stand beside me, not just as a protector, but as my king." Cale's eyes widened in surprise. He had never expected this, never imagined that Zara would offer him such an honor. He had always been a soldier, a warrior, and never imagined himself as royalty. But the way Zara spoke, with such sincerity and respect, made him realize how far they had come. I don't know what to say," Kyle said, his voice quiet. "You don't have to say anything," Zara replied, her smile warm. "I'm offering you this not because of your skills as a warrior, but because of the man you've become. You've earned it. You've earned my trust, my respect, and my heart." Cale's heart raced as he looked at Zara. She was the queen of the galaxy, a leader beyond compare, and yet she saw him as her equal. It was a gesture that meant more to him than any victory on the battlefield. "I accept," Cale said, his voice filled with determination. "Not as a king in name, but as a partner, a protector, and someone who will stand by you, no matter what." Zara's eyes shone with pride as she stepped closer to him. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the strength beneath the scars. He was her equal, her partner, and now, together, they would rule the galaxy. The next day, a grand ceremony was held in the palace. Leaders from across the galaxy gathered to witness the historic moment. Zara and Kyle stood before them, not as queen and warrior, but as rulers, united in their vision for a peaceful future. The crowd cheered as Zara placed the royal crown on Cale's head, a symbol of his new role by her side. The ceremony was a testament to the journey they had taken, together, a journey filled with sacrifices, struggles, and triumphs. But it was also a reminder that their work was far from over. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and they knew it would take time to heal the wounds of the past. But with Cale by her side, Zara was confident that they could build a future where all species could coexist in harmony. As the ceremony came to an end, Zara and Cale stood together, their hands clasped in solidarity. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready to face it together. That night, as they sat in the royal chambers, Zara turned to Cale, her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Kyle smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I did what any man would do for the woman he believes in." Zara leaned in, her heart full of gratitude and love. She knew that this was just the beginning of their journey, but together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. They had already proven that they could overcome anything, and as long as they stood together, nothing would tear them apart.